Welcome to Part 5 of The Crisis, a day-by-day account of Britain's 1931 crisis brought to you 90 years on. The 17th and 18th of August 1931 would see two crucial meetings of the Labour government's leading figures in the form of the Cabinet Economy Committee, as they attempted to agree on a programme to balance the budget and restore international confidence in British public finances, and thus sterling. Our challenge in recounting this story is that no minutes were taken at the Cabinet Economy Committee, and the only complete accounts of its discussions were written later and did not specify the order of events or even at which of four meetings of the committee certain points were raised. What we do know is that, as planned, the Cabinet Economy Committee met on the 17th of August but failed, as had been hoped, to come to an agreement. This meant that the proposed conference with the opposition leaders scheduled for the next day did not take place, both because the Cabinet Economy Committee had not finalized their proposals and because the Treasury was taking longer than expected to draw up tax increases. Instead, the 18th of August saw another lengthy session of the Cabinet Committee as they attempted to agree to a set of proposals to provide the full cabinet that was due to meet on the 19th. One thing we can say about the meeting on the 17th, the committee's third session, was that Foreign Secretary Arthur Henderson, likely supported by Willie Graham, was increasingly worried about the proposed cuts, particularly the cuts to the unemployment benefit. MacDonald recorded in his diary his evident frustration that day. Quote, "When we began, Henderson at once showed his hand. He wanted the whole scheme. I pointed out that we had met to make it. He objected to sacrifices being on one side, his reason alleged being that we were to discuss savings first. I said, first or last, we shall have to discuss them. Then he launched out into eloquence on the inadequacy of the unemployed grants and what we had all said for 30 years. We pointed out that this was a special crisis and we hoped temporary, that if the income was not there could not be expenditure. He could not reply but lapsed into sulky silence, and we went on with business. It was a bitter day, and grievous is our just complaint against Providence." Henderson's concerns were understandable. There were already reports of considerable disquiet from within the Labour Party about the cuts the May report had recommended. The Foreign Secretary was obviously worried that by presenting an austerity program, the government could face a backbench or even cabinet revolt. On the other hand, MacDonald and Snowden clearly wanted to agree on the cuts first and then look at tax rises. Both would be needed to balance the budget, but starting out with an announcement of a raft of tax increases was hardly likely to stem the flight of capital from London. If anything, it would exacerbate the situation. Whereas announcing a package of spending cuts first would be far more likely to calm the international markets. Furthermore, the savings to be made in public spending would surely be more controversial within the Labour cabinet than new taxation, and therefore it would make sense to iron out the cuts first. The most contentious single issue the committee discussed was Snowden's proposed 10% cut in unemployment benefit, a compromise from the 20% the May report had recommended. It has been said that Henderson and President of the Board of Trade Willie Graham laid down on the 17th and 18th that they would oppose any cut whatsoever in the rate of the benefit. This is possible, as the committee's final report was silent on the issue. Although this could also be read as the issue being deferred to the cabinet as a whole, and certainly that is how Snowden and MacDonald saw it. An alternative to a cut in unemployment benefit was discussed. How could the shortfall be made up? On the 18th of August, the committee discussed tax rises in long sessions running from 10:30 to 1 and then 2:30 to 6 p.m. The greatest friction came over tariffs. 4 of the 5 members of the Economy Committee eventually supported the idea of a revenue tariff, a 10% tax on all imports, including food, that would generate substantial revenues for the Treasury. Henderson, Graham, and MacDonald were nominally free traders, opposed to all tariffs, but they were prepared to impose the tax if it meant sparing the unemployed. J.H. Thomas had for some time been converted to the need for tariffs. Crucially, however, the Chancellor Philip Snowden was the most ardent of free traders. The introduction of any tariff, even an emergency measure like this, was totally unacceptable to him. Therefore, on the 2 areas in which the committee could not agree, tariffs and the dole, the discussion was postponed until the full cabinet assembled. What Henderson and Graham appeared to have insisted on in the meetings of the 17th and 18th of August is that the report that the Cabinet Economy Committee was to present to the Cabinet on the 19th was provisional. The committee's proposals would be debated and discussed by the full Cabinet rather than imposed on them. MacDonald saw this as spineless opportunism. Henderson and Graham were hedging their bets. They likely would have defended their actions as wanting to secure the approval of their colleagues before committing themselves to anything as drastic as the cuts under consideration. Nevertheless, the 4 meetings of the Cabinet Economy Committee did produce a definite, unanimous program. Labor's Big Five agreed to submit a set of spending proposals to the full cabinet that they all supported, even if Snowden, in particular, did not believe they went far enough. The proposals were as follows: £88.5 million of tax rises and £78,575,000 worth of savings were required to balance the budget. These savings were to come from the following sources: £48.5 million from unemployment benefits, £11.4 million from teachers' salaries, £9 million from armed services pay, £500,000 from police pay, £7.8 million from the road fund, £6.375 million from other assorted minor savings such as a cut in ministerial salaries. If no 10% cut in the dole was being proposed, where did the savings from unemployment insurance come from? £15 million would come from increased contributions by employers and employees. £8 million would come from a reduction in the length of time that the benefit could be claimed to 26 weeks. £3 million was optimistically sought from removing so-called anomalies, i.e. fraudulent claims or accounting errors. And finally, as a face-saver for Henderson and Graham, $2.5 million would come from making the unemployed themselves paying a weekly premium of $1 to the insurance fund in the form of deductions taken out of their benefit. This was, in essence, a disguised cut in unemployment benefit, and Henderson had suggested it as a way of avoiding a straight cut in the rate while still maintaining the principle of equal sacrifice, and taking into account the falling cost of living. The committee also decided that savings of £20 million would come from transitional benefit, the money paid once your 26 weeks of insurance payments ran out. These would take the form of a cut in its basic rate, the introduction of a means test on the benefit, and accountancy tricks that would transfer much of the cost of the benefit to local authorities. This was the end result of the 4 long meetings of the Cabinet Economy Committee. Labor's Big Five had come up with a program. However, none of them considered the proposals satisfactory or definite. Chancellor Snowden believed even deeper cuts were necessary, especially a 10% cut in the dole. MacDonald and Thomas likely agreed more sacrifices were needed in order to win liberal and conservative support. 4 of the committee believed a revenue tariff preferable and a possible way of avoiding some of the proposed cuts. Henderson and Graham were showing signs of dissent and were certainly keeping their options open by insisting on the provisionality of all their discussions. The stage was set for the cabinet crisis that would bring down the second Labour government. Thanks so much for watching episode 5 of The Crisis. If you enjoyed it, consider dropping a like because it really helps us out. And if you're not already, consider subscribing as well to never miss another episode. We'd like to, as always, thank our patrons, including our executive producers, Eustace Abel, Jeremy Marcoux, Tom McCool, and Tony Churin, for helping to support the show. Thanks so much, and see you in the next episode.